yourself out.
Get back, tell you what I'll do. If I ever get back, I promise to refabricate you.
I'd like to guys introduce you guys real quick to our special guest. Just had him come into the room. Everybody, please welcome Tom Thummery.
On this episode of Omegle.
No, I'm here, and your white privileges are going to save you tonight, okay, guys?
That's right. It's time for the Dog and Chicken Show. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dog and Chicken Show, episode 89, Waco. And as always, to my, is that my right? Yeah, that's my right. Technically, it's my left, but it's my right. Tony fucking G, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm just enjoying life. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Beautiful day indeed. And then holding us up from down under, none other.
Well, that was awkward as fuck.
Yeah. Okay, for audio listeners, this was a visual.
It's a visual gag, folks. But, folks, worry not. Welcome, one and all, to Big Buckin' Entertainment, the Dog and Chicken Show. I am the devilish handsome outlaw himself, your king of extreme, Phil KOE. You can find me at KOE Nation on YouTube and Twitch. You know it's the right thing to do. But this evening, folks, we are getting into some very interesting topics, but we are also coming off the tremendous success, gentlemen. Let's not be modest here. The tremendous success of the second annual Andre the Giant Beer Challenge, where we rose above, and together, Big Bucket Empire, the KOE Nation, the Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast Universe, all came together. Yes. They all came together, and we hit Andre the Giant's 106 beer threshold, 117 beer threshold, 126 beer threshold, past the 156 beer threshold, and landed at 181. It was getting rough, but we did it. We did it together, folks.
It was getting rough. Was like, that's saying it nicely.
Yes, I'm being very diplomatic, but it was an amazing time. Be sure to check that out on top of everything else. And yes, but folks, now we have come together for a very interesting look back into an interesting moment in our history. And this is one, Chicken's been looking forward to it. Tony, Mr. Timeline himself, he's got all the facts ready for you. This is going to be a deep dive into Yes, this is going to be an alleged deep dive into one Waco, Texas, and the controversies surrounding thereof. So for those who might not be familiar, for those who are familiar, gather around, pour yourself a drink, grab yourself a snack. We're going to get deep into this. But before we do, gentlemen, what are you drinking tonight?
So doing my normal, my pre-warm up with my Crown and Coke, but in honor of our awesome feat of 180 beers last week, I am going to switch over to beer. I'm going to be drinking Heineken the rest of the night.
Oh, nice.
Ooh.
And actually, it's 181. Don't sell yourself short, Chicken.
Fair. Yeah.
So, Tony, what are you drinking this evening?
I decided to get into kind of a sleeper here, but a Glenfiddich Project XX, one of those that you're not going to see a lot of anymore, but I got about a half a bottle left, and I thought tonight was a good night to dip into it. It's not one that is going to be the most popular, but this is a really nice, sweet scotch. I really enjoy this stuff.
And of course, drinking words. Got them scrolling down below. Those listening in, feel free to play along.
Oh, you
If
got
we
it.
say mullet, guns, tanks, Colt, or if Tony's kids interrupt the show, Phil, what are you drinking tonight, sir?
I'm actually having some of the wonderful Rabbit Hole Derringer.
Oh, good stuff.
Yeah, we all reviewed this together at Chicken's House. You can find the review for it at KOE Nation. And also the distillery reached out to me and said, thanks for the kind words. So next time I saw one of these, I picked one up, and that's a really easy way for a distillery to get a customer for life. And last time my brother was over, we got into this, and he agreed this is amazingly good stuff. Like, this is better than some pretty high up bourbons we were trying. So I'm going to be having some Rabbit Hole sherry soaked bourbon. Excellent.
My niece graduated this last weekend, and you know, of course, adults only are drinking at this party. But I bought an extra bottle of that Rabbit Hole Derringer and brought it over there. It was a hit. Everybody was loving that stuff, and actually met some guy named Bill, and me and my brother Lynn and Bill sat around and just talked about scotch and bourbon for about 2.5 hours, and then he said he probably should go because he still had to drive across town, and I was like, I am so sorry. But me and Lynn sat and drank more.
Well, that's fair. Speaking of that Rabbit Hole Derringer, last time I was over at Phil's here for the Andre Challenge. Or no, excuse me, this was for the WWE Shit Show pay-per-view, Backlash WrestleMania Zombie Fest. Made me drink a lot of booze that night because just, to get through it. Yeah, you retained. It's about to come back home this weekend. Don't you worry. AEW, Double or Nothing. Chicken will lose the title. That's not
Do I have to buy this one?
That's a guarantee. Yeah, I'm sorry. You do, champ.
On Memorial Weekend?
Yep, that's what AEW does.
Well, let's be frank. You're going to watch it on your phone on YouTube the next morning like everybody else does.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, Phil and I are going to watch this thing live probably. Maybe, hopefully.
That's how
maybe
a
the
lot
champ
of people...
Maybe the champ's going to phone it in, but I'm going to be trying to watch this one live.
Oh.
But I digress. Speaking of the Rabbit Hole Derringer,
fantastic. The only way they can beat me is by switching platforms. Like they can't.
If you were a true champion, you'd be ready to defend at all shows, just like myself, and to a lesser extent, Phil KOE.
I didn't say I wouldn't.
Anywho.
I just found it funny. And you know what? I never noticed until the night the intro has the belt behind me. So like every show, I'm just showing you that I'm the champ. I just noticed that tonight. I was like, oh my god,
so
I'm kind of a dick.
Update that right quick. But again, speaking of the Rabbit Hole Derringer, I'm going to bring this all back to Texas, guys. This is how you segue like a champ. I do believe Phil and I decided that we're going to put the Rabbit Hole Derringer Sherry Cask finish up against another Sherry Cask whiskey in TX Sherry Cask. Versus video, one-on-one. And of course, TX Sherry does come from Texas, hence the TX. So look forward to that versus video because that is going to be really, really interesting. I was delighted to see how well they stacked up against each other. And we're a big fan of the TX brand, and we're becoming big fans of the Rabbit Hole as well. So that's going to be a fun one to check out. Make sure you get your ass over to KOE Nation and anticipate that one. But speaking of Texas, let's get into our topic, gents.
Here we go back to
A+.
That was an A+ segue. Kudos, sir. Kudos. Almost worth the championship belt, but not quite. Not yet. Got to earn that. So anyway, Waco, Texas, David Koresh. These are all familiar words and names in the English language these days, but not everybody really knows what happened. And like I have a broad, very I got a good memory of what it was. I was a child when this was happening. I think I was 8. I was like 7, 8 years old. I remember watching this on the news. I remember seeing like this building on fire and tanks driving around it, and like everybody was pissed about it. And I was like, what the fuck happened there? Like, and then so we did the Ruby Ridge story. and Ruby Ridge, obviously, just a few years prior to Waco, and it all kind of culminated together a little bit of a lot of shit. Bad things happened to bad people did bad things, and the government overreached in some instances. Maybe not bad people. I don't know. Depends on who you are and what you believe. But this story is so fucking crazy. And when everybody worries about, today's government overreach when it comes to this weird, like, seizing control of all of your rights and everything that you're trying to do, this was one of the biggest, and I think this was the most deadly, if I'm not mistaken, since in like modern history, the most deadly government siege on U.S. civilians that I can remember. Phil, maybe you know of something bigger prior to Waco?
Not like I say off the top of my head. No, this is certainly not in the modern era. There's not one that I can really think of. And this one is just, again, there's a lot of the same players from our previous episode at Ruby Ridge make an appearance here, which is the weird, like, that's the strange part about it, is there's this weird kind of string of the same actors showing up to these two different events. But yeah, it's been so long, like you said. To me, I find it another fascinating moment in our nation's history. And I've kind of had a joke with some people that if it was like, let's be frank, it was terrible that people lost their lives. And that is the worst thing. But if we would probably all know at least one or two people out in the woods that'd be trying to start their own little, we're going to wait this out until apocalypse end if this hadn't been cracked down on. So I'm being facetious, of course, but yeah, it was a terrible thing that happened, that way too many people lost their lives. It was some folks just not wanting to budge. And like I said with the last story we had, and I'm going to maintain it with this one, like Abraham Lincoln once said, there are times when the path of mercy is preferable to strict justice. And
with that said, let's get into a little bit of the build to it. Tony, do you have a date for us? When does this all begin? I got a little prelude info, but when's David Koresh come on scene?
Okay, so this is all coming straight from Wikipedia. Chicken and I kind of agreed that this is a very in-depth summarization of pretty much everything. I mean, the background, this dips into the background. I don't know when you want to touch on that about when he came into power, but let me see here. Stepping in right to the background, this is the first thing that pops up. This touches on the Branch Davidians, also known as the Branch. It's a religious group originated in 1955, schism in the Shepherd's Rod Davidians, following death of Shepherd's Rod founder Victor Hotef. Founded Davidians based on his prophecy of an imminent apocalypse. Don't they all start that way, though? And the second coming of Jesus Christ. Hoo-hoo. Spoiler alert. Well, allegedly. And the defeat of evil armies of Babylon. As the original Davidian group gained members, its leadership moved to the church of a hilltop several miles east of Waco, Texas, which they named Mount Carmel, after a mountain in Israel mentioned in Joshua 19:26 in the Bible Old Testament. A few years later, they moved again to a much larger site east of the city. Victor's widow, Florence Hotef, announced that she'd expected Armageddon was about to take place. Yet another premonition. And members were told to gather at the center to wait this event. So, they're building houses, they're staying in tents, trucks. They're pretty much just camping this out like it's a big old Woodstock festival at this point. Following the failure of this prophecy, control side of Mount Carmel fell to Benjamin Roden, founder of the Branch Davidian Seventh-day Advent Association, Branch Davidians. He promoted different doctrinal beliefs than those of Victor Hotef's original Davidian Seventh-day Advent organization. So you're starting to see the splitting off of all the different sects of this, because, of course, You've got these
This is
premonitions happening.
This is starting to sound like the NWO in the late 90s.
I know, right?
Exactly. Oh my God! Thank you for going there. Yes, the LWO, the B. Yeah, exactly. It's
Well, there was
you
the
can't
NWO,
have somebody.
the NWO Black and Red, the NWO 2000, NWO Silver.
Oh,
there was a lot of NWOs, and so it started spinning off.
So that's the problem for me. Whenever you hear about something like this, you know that all the people who are invested.
Oh, it's
in this,
deeper than NWO. This is a better story than NWO.
The people
here's
that get
the
invested
deal.
in something like this go
I
whole
don't know.
hog.
That was the best heel turn of all time. So I don't know. Chicken.
Wow.
It was, and people still talk about it 25 years later, obviously, so it must be worth it.
Speaking of things that people still talk about 20 some years later, so
Yeah.
Waco, Texas.
So here's the deal. So this Branch Davidian group was led by this lady named Lois Roden. Actually had a sexual relationship with David Koresh. At that time, he was known as Vernon Wayne Howell.
No.
Yes. Well, shocked. He had to change his name. So anyway, she was much older than him. And her son George Roden was he assumed that he would take over the church after she had passed, but she had said he would not be fit and would not be the one to carry on after she passed on power and wanted Mr. Vernon Wayne Howell to take over, later known as David Koresh. And this did not sit well. And George Roden was he was a little bit of a loose cannon. It might be
That's
the word.
a nice way to put it. Yeah, let's go with loose cannon. That's pretty gentle.
So he kicks Vernon, later known as David, out along with what followers he had. So they built their own little refuge down the road and were living separately and slowly like stealing, people from the church because nobody liked George. George was a dick. He was very brash. Nobody liked him. He actually changed the name of the mount, I think, the mountain or their compound to like it was Church George or something. He like named it after himself. Like the dude was super into himself. I'm trying to find what he named it, but it was terrible.
A trend with cult leaders. Yeah,
with this particular
very
little
obsessive,
branch
narcissistic.
of the NWO, I'm noticing it's a also
it gets better. The Undertaker comes around.
Yes, but there's one thing. Yes. Ouch. Well. Well done.
Yes.
Wow. But okay, I got it back. That made me forget for a second what I was even going to say. Well done. But no, like, let's also not forget there's something that's really looked over. David Koresh was a tremendously persuasive individual. He was very adept at the powers of persuasion. And
what a promo!
If you, as much as I say, if you ever watched any of his old sermons, and also watch the Waco movie that has John Leguizamo playing the undercover, because the actor that plays David Koresh really gets across the idea of just how charismatic and how infectious of a personality this man had, that like he could talk to somebody for 20 minutes and then they would be living at his compound. Like and so that's why, like, I always try to tell people, you need to have good powers of persuasion, because there are folks out there that use their powers not for good, but for evil.
Yes. So jumping back into George Roden, they challenged each other. So David Koresh had stolen a bunch of patrons from the church. Basically, they're all like, no, we're leaving George. We're going to go hang out with this dude. He's way more charismatic, as Phil put it. So he put up this weird challenge. It was, could you resurrect a dead body? And so, yes, this was this
Who
is
threw
how
the challenge down? Was it George or David?
George threw the challenge down. So George Roden, he dug up the casket of Anne Hughes. She was a Davidian out of their own cemetery, and challenged the resurrection contest to prove who should be the rightful heir to the leadership. So guess what? Vernon Howell / David Koresh did? He said, well, that's illegal. So he calls the cops.
Yeah.
Wait, there's more.
How
He-
is he the first one? What the fuck? Don't make David Koresh the fucking voice of reason. What the fuck? Like, no.
Oh, no, it gets better. It gets better. So David Koresh goes to the cops and says, hey, this dude just dug up some lady and wants to have a contest to resurrect her. And they said, oh, bullshit. Get me some proof. They said, get us proof. So David Koresh and his church went out. Of course, they know George is armed, and both of these churches are fully armed all the time. So they try to sneak out to get pictures so they can get the cops to come arrest this dude. Well, guess what? They catch each other. Gunfight ensues. Well, why did the gunfight break out? Nobody dies in this scenario, but they just start shooting at each other, and they all get arrested. And nobody is convicted of any crimes because the cops told David Koresh's church to go get evidence, even though they knew there was a crime. The police did did not want to investigate this, apparently. Like, it was a total fuck up from day one. It was a fuck up from local law enforcement of like, why wouldn't you just go check?
Yeah, because if you're the police department, you want to believe that this is a wild goose chase and this is just some crazy guy trying to get attention.
You're like,
But,
crazy cult people out in the woods,
Just
or
send the deputy out to go ask. Yeah, I heard there's a corpse.
That wouldn't, yeah, simple.
you go drive
Simple.
through the cemetery. I bet it's dug up.
Yeah,
Like,
that's all it took. Yeah, go do your job. Go do one simple patrol to verify that this is true, and this all could have been avoided potentially. Let me just rip the last paragraph from Wikipedia here. On November 3rd, 1987, Howell and 7 armed companions tried to get into the Mount Carmel Chapel, intending to photograph the body in the casket as incriminating evidence. Roden was informed of the interlopers and opened fire. The sheriff's department responded about 20 minutes into the gunfight, during which Roden had been wounded. I think it was his hand. I don't think it was anything very severe. Sheriff Harwell got Howell on the phone and told him to stop shooting and surrender. Howell and his companions, dubbed the Rodenville 8 by the media, were tied for attempted murder on April 12, 1988. 7 were acquitted, and the jury hung on Howell's verdict. The county prosecutors did not press the case further. And that part, I believe this is the really interesting part, is in terms of the backstory to David Koresh, because this really kind of set the ball in terms of how persuasive this guy was.
One of the jurors actually afterwards came and gave him a hug. He was so fucking convincing.
That is
kind
the
of
power of
Kind of
persuasion.
shocked one of the jurors didn't become, like what you're saying, power of persuasion. I'm shocked one of the jurors didn't become a member of his sect afterwards. Like,
I can't believe they all didn't.
Like, if he had that long in a room with you, like, there's no telling how much he could turn your brains to scrambled eggs. Okay, so that's why. But this whole story here, like, I'm hearing all this part for the first time. Like, I'm wondering about the other guy's little sect. Did nobody say, "Hey, maybe don't do that"? Or
let me tell you about what happened to George.
Hang on, my other thought is, hang on, here's a corpse here. Let's have ourselves a reviving contest. Well, George, have at it. Give it a good old college try. See if even if you fuck everything up, worst case scenario, you might get a pulse. I mean, shit. Like, I don't like. What's the thought process there? Like, I'm not gonna give it a
3,
try.
4. I declare a corpse war.
I just waiting for the Undertaker's music and Kane's music to start playing right now. It's like,
like, just that little bit you described there of the digging up the body, and the issue thereabout is at least a 5-part miniseries on A&E. Just right there is just like, what? No.
A&E ain't gonna have shit on the History Channel when they start getting the aliens
Okay.
involved with this backstory.
AMC, maybe, I don't know, Netflix or Hulu. Like we'll see who grabs that. But yeah, that alone, just that little stretch. You don't even need to go.
Oh, there's more.
Like, I know there's more because even I know some of the more. So yeah, apparently. So Tony, Mr. Timeline himself, carry us away.
Well, can I talk about what happened to Roden?
Roden
dude, the Roden dude that used to be in charge. So they're all in court, right? And all of David's people are getting off, and everything's fine on their end. Roden gets contempt of court because he can't keep his shit under control. He starts cussing at the judge, loses his fucking temper. So he gets thrown in there. Well, then he gets turned in for a 1989 murder of another Davidian that he like killed with an axe. And so this dude's just gone. He gets convicted of murder under insanity. So I don't know if he ended up in the psych ward or something, but yeah. So now there's nobody in the way. The Roden dude's mom was banging this dude, David, and now nobody's in the way. David slowly pays back all the pays for the property, takes over the entire church, and then that's when they renamed it to what's the name of the place again? It's Mount Pleasant or Mount what? The hell they name it?
Now,
Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel.
Yeah, Mount Carmel, yes.
David Koresh was banging this one dude's mom, which again,
so that's probably why this dude hated
showing
him.
of things to come. He ended up banging also a lot of mom. Like apparently that was just another theme throughout his life. But yeah, I can't imagine why that guy might.
David Koresh.
All cult leaders eventually just want to bang your wife.
Drink. You said cult.
Yeah.
And I said.
Uh-huh.
But I can't imagine why. I'm gonna just say it. Why that cult leader wouldn't like David much? Because let's see, you're taking my flock, you're taking my grift, and you banged my mom too. So, fuck you, motherfucker. I can't imagine why.
And you're doing it better than me. No.
Yeah. That guy was so howling at the moon mad. He thought digging up a corpse was a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's fucked up. Yeah.
This is keep going. This is wow. I should have done some. I should have read this years ago.
Yeah, this is like banging your bully's mom just as a power flex. This is when it goes really, really wrong.
Yeah, there's a kid in the UK that did that, and I raised my glass. Well done, sir.
Yeah, while we're on the history and we talked about bullying, so supposedly David Koresh was was raised in his parents were super young. One of them, I think it was his dad, wasn't allowed to be with his mom anymore. So it was a really fucked up. He was beaten a lot as a kid. He was called retarded as a kid and just treated really, really poorly. So this kid was bullied all of his life, and he had certain dreams. He wanted to be like Hollywood famous, and he wanted to be involved in God and all this other stuff. So he's slowly realizing his dream right now.
Yeah, he was also in a band too, which when I found that out that he was, and of course, take a wild guess what part in the band he was.
Lead singer, guitarist?
Lead singer, lead guitarist. Yep. What else would he be other than lead singer, lead guitarist in a band? So,
well, he's not going to be the bassist.
Nobody remembers the bassist.
Primus is the only example. Fuck you! I'm playing lead bass. Sad but true.
It is.
So
nobody wants to be.
Nobody wants to be the bassist. I remember as a kid, my brother's one of my brothers is super awesome at guitar. And I wanted him to start teaching me. He goes, well, I got a bass guitar you can practice with. I was like, I don't want to play bass. Nobody wants to play the bass because nobody cares about the bass guitars.
Nobody likes Peter.
Well, you're not going to do a bass solo and woo all the chicks.
Nope.
You know who would have wanted to play bass?
Imagine all the
Roden.
chicks looking at me when I go boom, 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 like, you're like, what the fuck is he
You can't have
doing?
Tenacious D without Jack Black.
Yeah,
Kyle Gass doesn't work. You got to have Jack Black too. So it is.
All right. God damn it, where were we?
But shortly, let me finish up here the Wikipedia entry. Shortly,
let's get back
after Roden's commitment. This is when Howell raised enough money to pay off all the back taxes on the Mount Carmel owned by Roden, and he took legal control of the property. So now this is his compound. He's sliding into power officially at this point. So after those proceedings, it's noted in an interview by the Davidians' attorney, Douglas Martin, that the religious group had been back and forth to the court since 1955. So this is something they've been doing this for a while. It's not like they've been in good standing amongst the community. They've kind of been battling for their rights for a long time, and obviously an internal power struggle, especially now. So on August 5th, 1989, Howell released the New Light audio tape, in which he says that God told him to procreate with the women in the group to establish a house of David of his special people. This involves separating the married couples individually. They have to agree that only he could have sexual relations with the wives, while the men should definitely not do anything. They have to be celibate.
Men had to be celibate and no masturbation.
Yeah. Right. Of course not. No, only David at this point.
This is one persuasive motherfucker.
Wow.
He's using his powers for evil, but he's talking men into being celibate and for marriage,
letting him bang their wives
for his benefit. Like I said,
sorry guys, I'm the Messiah. I'll jump on that grenade.
What combination of words did he put together to I am curious. That's what the fuck?
You don't need that power.
No human being needs that power. That's
right.
We saw what happened. It didn't end well.
No.
Yeah. So this is when he starts to assemble an army, because God has told him that the end of days is coming and there will be salvation for your followers. So you need to have an army. So I assume this is when the stockpiling of weapons really... I know they were enthusiasts before this, but
so
I'm pretty sure this is when the arsenal really started getting amped up at this point, I believe.
So this is the early 90s, right? So you think about the time frame. AR-15s became very expensive in a very short amount of time. And he had purchased, I can't remember, but what it was, there was a local army supply company thing or whatever that went belly up, and he bought all of their supply, all their fatigues, all their bullets, all their guns, everything they had. He bought it all up super cheap. And then ARs skyrocketed, went through the roof, and now he could make money. He had 100 people living at his compound. He's got to feed these people. They're not working. They don't have incomes. They live there and they just work together, but they still need to buy supplies and buy food and shit. So yeah, the gun deal, he saw the money in it. I really think he made that one purchase and went, holy shit, I just made bank. I can make a lot of money off of this.
Yep. So
and
at
I'm
this
assuming
point,
the ATF ran a touch afoul of this massive amount of stockpiling.
At first, yes, they were the local government
later, even more. Yes,
they were. It was suspicious, of course, but the big tipping point was they allegedly ordered hollowed out hand grenades. And the UPS driver goes to lift the crate and the lid popped off and he just sees a crate full of hand grenades and goes, oh shit, and calls the police. ATF starts getting involved and they begin investigating, produce an affidavit and they're surveillancing at this point to see suspected of converting ARs into fully automatic rifles. They were suspected of all kinds of There was like
Not the
black
only
powder
time.
shipments
Not the
coming
only
in.
time a mail carrier gets involved in this story.
Right? Yeah.
Oh boy, there's more.
Yeah, mail carrier. Yeah, a different one comes back to.
Yeah.
Oh
Weird.
shit. Yeah.
Fucking lightning strikes twice, huh?
Uh-huh.
So he
Something
legally
about being a
changes his
postal
name.
worker in Texas.
Well,
Yeah,
when you got a
weird.
when you got like a religious compound out in the middle of nowhere, that's
Buying
gonna get
grenades.
that's gonna get
Yeah.
from folk.
But they're Branch Davidians. They're like the Seventh Advent. Yeah, they take Saturdays off instead of Sundays.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that's
all of that sounds
Yeah,
like,
that's all.
oh no, they're about to start shaving their heads, aren't they? Like, yeah.
Side note, I don't want to bitch about religions, but I will tell a funny anecdotal story. The first time I heard about the Seventh Advent Church or whatever, I literally thought it was just like a new church that started up just so they could take Saturdays off of work, because I had somebody that just was like, I have to have every Saturday off for church. I'm like, who the fuck goes to church on Saturday? I'd never heard of this religion. I didn't know anything about it. So like, I was totally ignorant to everything, but I seriously thought the person that was working for me made up a religion to where they had to take Saturdays off. I'm like, this is fucking bullshit. You need to work Saturdays, but no.
And how can I convert?
Yeah, now I'm like, can I join?
Seventh
I'm your new
Adventist.
Messiah.
Yeah. All right. So
And pause for edit.
finishing up finish up literally finishing up the background. This is when he changes his name to David Koresh, and unfortunately all that this says is he changed his name to David Koresh for publicity and business purposes. I would really like some more insight into why that name was chosen.
Yeah, they were religious names. I'm trying to remember. Obviously,
David is the house of David.
House of David. Koresh
Jesus is of the house of David. So that's why he chose that name, because Jesus Christ is one of the ways that he was to be shown to be actually a legitimate prophet is he would be of the house of David. So that's most likely why David Koresh chose it. Now, Koresh,
Okay.
I think, is a mountain in Israel somewhere, but I could be wrong on that.
Pulled it up, and Koresh is Hebrew, and it's a name corresponding to the anglicized name Cyrus, commonly referring to Cyrus the Great. It can also mean son in Old Persian. It can also refer to the following people: Cyrus Teed, called Koresh, a 19th century spiritualist. So that makes perfect sense. He thought this one out very, very in
Jesus
depth.
the Great.
Yeah, there you go. So this is, at this point, they've got their stockpiling. They own their land, and many of the group members, they've been involved with the Davidians for a few generations. They've got their large families. All these people are very invested in this. Most of the buildings are being removed and salvaged for construction materials. They convert the main chapel and the tall water tank into apartments for some residents. It's growing at this point. So Koresh has risen to power. He's risen to fame. He's starting to set new guidelines, and yeah, people are starting to take notice, I guess, at this point. And that ends the background portion of the Wikipedia entry, and next portion would be the prelude. Anything we need to jump on before we do that?
No, I think we kind of added the prelude into the background story. I think we got through most of that. I think we've gotten to the point where ATF's investigating David Koresh. They think he has illegal weapons. They want to come arrest him, in which leads to the next part, which is the raid.
Right.
Showtime was the code name, by the way.
A lot of this in the prelude, like, you can look this up for yourself. This gets really in depth into, I don't want to call it a smear campaign. I don't want to call it pulling the curtain back to expose somebody, but it gets dark. It starts talking about some very dark stuff happening within the compound, some very dark things that Koresh was allegedly doing to certain members or having them do for him. Like, it gets really
there were
deep
things
and dark.
some things were confirmed. I mean, he wanted to have the 21 kids and make the house of David. He did marry a 14-year-old girl and have a daughter with her, which is statutory rape in the state of in most states.
In all states.
But like his whole compound was set up to where all the women were his wives. Like that's literally what the religious rules and laws were.
Basically
Which comes,
taking the nun concept. You're married to Jesus.
Yep, exactly. And he was,
Yeah. And now, in addition to the allegations of abuse and misconduct, Koresh's followers suspected of stockpiling illegal weapons. We touched on that. So now this is when Sheriff's Department called the ATF. Hey, this is when the UPS guy notices the grenades. Maybe we need to check into this a little bit. So June, the ATF opens up an investigation. Week later, it's classified as sensitive, thereby calling for a high degree of oversight. So that's from both Houston and headquarters. So this is when they start. I don't know if this is when society really started looking at them in terms of newsworthy people doing something a little wacky out there, because you're seeing documentaries start to spring up according to this. And I don't really remember any, like you said, we were all kids at this time, but I don't remember anything about this until
there was a specific news article that the ATF was trying to stop local papers from releasing, because Koresh called himself the sinful Messiah. And they were going to release a Waco Tribune Herald article describing like what's going on out there. And the ATF knew as soon as the story broke, they would get worried, suspicious of police activity. And so they were like, don't break the story. Don't break the story. And they gave him like, it went on for like 3 weeks. And then they were finally like, fuck it, we're releasing the story. And the FBI hadn't had their raid fully planned out yet. And so they were super worried that as soon as the story broke and people found out what was going on there and what the claims were, that they would arm up and they would they'd be waiting at the gates for anybody that came to serve a warrant or even come talk to them. They were really afraid of their reaction to it because they were kind of quiet for the most part. Everybody kind of knew them, but like the allegations and claims were more rumors at the time. And this was going to be a publication news source going to say that, yes, David slept with a 14-year-old and had a child. Like there was going to be all this stuff in there. And it really made them look like a cult leader. And they were like, if you print this, they're going to fight us tooth and nail when we try to go in. Please don't do this.
Yep. Now, real quick, let me finish. Oh, sorry. Do you got something, Phil?
No, I'm just like, oh God.
Phil's just making
somebody's sitting there with a big old thing of gasoline, just chucking it on the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
There we go.
This is me in high school poking the spray paint can on the fire with a stick.
Yep.
Like right now, we're on the roller coaster. And we're just starting to get up to the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And here in a couple of paragraphs, we're about to go, whoa! Because, this is about to get fuckered up, folks. So, Tony, take it away.
I'll finish off here on the prelude. This is real quick. Sheriff told the reporters regarding law enforcement and talking with Koresh, just go out and talk to him. What's wrong with notify him? So the ATF began their surveillance from across the road from the compound months before the siege. Now, this is, I believe, when they started sending in undercover agent Robert Rodriguezson, whose identity, I don't know, Koresh, this says that he did learn it, but he didn't reveal that until the day of the raid. So regardless of that, this is when they're sending undercover agents in to get intel from inside. The ATF obtains a search warrant on suspicion Davidians are modifying guns to have legal automatic fire capabilities, claiming M16 and lower receiver parts. So this is the justification. Exactly. This is alleged at this point. They're getting the search warrant. They're trying to find reasons to get in there and take care of this and take this whole thing down. So, and like you said, this was just a couple years after Ruby Ridge. So the
Branch Davidians were on edge because they felt themselves in that same group of people that just want to be left alone and not be bothered by the government and live to their own religion. Like they really, really thought that way.
They see a scenario like that on a smaller scale, and it's not like they're stupid people. You've got Harvard graduates in this compound, for God's sake. So it's not like they're dumb by any means, but they're looking at this situation like, hey, we're a larger group of people. We know what they did. We know what they're capable of. That could happen to us and be a lot worse. Spoiler alert. But yeah, so of course they're going to be on edge at this point. But of course, the ATF and the FBI, they're all trying to save face and, okay, let's do this right this time. Well, there's too many cooks in the kitchen on that deal. The next chapter here is the Aguilera affidavit. Do you want to just gloss over that real quick?
I think we already did. That was the evidence of the grenades. There was possibly 50 caliber machine guns, the supposed M16s, which turned out to just be AR-15s. Common mistake back then with uneducated gun owners.
Back then, I think that's still current.
Yeah, that's still current. But yeah, there was noise complaints, gunshot complaints, and stuff like that. There's enough suspicion to cause them to get some paperwork filed and get an affidavit.
Yeah, November of 92, local farmer reports to the sheriff he's hearing machine gun fire. By the sound of it, it was likely a 50 caliber machine gun and multiple M16s, the farmer claims. So based off of that claim alone,
I'm just picturing a couple of farmers I know that don't know shit about guns. There's a few of them out there. I know everybody thinks every farmer's a gun expert. They're not. Not all of them are. Some of them. I'm not going to say they're Joe Biden gun experts, but they're not that bad.
Well, you're talking about FUDs. That's a whole different topic for another day.
I'm pretty sure this was a FUD.
Sounds like, but again, just 3 or 4 folks just firing off their SKSs all next to each other. That's
can sound like machine gun.
Oh, that's going to sound like somebody's warring over the hills. Like
just for comparison's sake, the year I won this squirrel title right here, we got the cops called on us, my dad and I did, for firing off shotguns in town, even though we weren't in town and we were using airsoft rifles. So, easy to make these kinds of mistakes if you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. If either of you ever hung out at the cabin, at my old man's old cabin out by the river, it was like a war zone out there every weekend. So, that's all you heard was gunshots for hours. Just anyway.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That could have been a compound. Time. Hell, you had it was kind of water a right there. Yeah,
a source of water was completely cut off. Anyway,
so yet another misunderstanding is now leading to. Now, granted, I don't get me wrong. Like, I sympathize with all of the people that lost their lives in this, but I do find, like, just personally from my interpretation, I've always found David Koresh very much at fault for this.
Yeah.
Like he's like he was the central stubbornness that refused to move, and he was using these people as a shield, which is not good. And so that's so I have nothing but sympathy for these folks because they're being because in the last few days I've been watching a lot of documentaries about North Korea, and so they've only been having one version of reality fed to them, and that's David's version, and so they are going to believe it, and they're going to follow him to the very pits of hell if they have to, and so that's the unfortunate impasse we find ourselves in. Now, gentlemen, the rest of the story.
So this is we're starting on the ATF raid at this point. This is the preparation stage. And using the Aguilera affidavit, the ATF obtains the search and arrest warrants for Koresh and some of his specific followers on the weapons charges. But not just that, this is during, the height of we're starting the war on drugs, right? So we're going to start claiming that there might be a methamphetamine lab to really bring this all home and justify all this. So I don't think there was ever any evidence whatsoever of any kind of drugs. I could be wrong on this. Am I incorrect? But this was just kind of a
As
throwing
far as,
shit at the wall and watching it stick.
Yeah, I don't
As-
think there was any drugs
as
as I remember.
No, that was actually one of the prerequisites to being allowed to live in the compound was no drugs. But that's as far as I know. That's
Right.
in retrospect and talking to people that were there, that was one of the big deals was like no drugs. Now, granted, when you got a group like this and you're already pushing the boundaries this far, it might be good to just not poke that bear while you're at it. So
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the justifications on this, and they've got several bullet points. Recent delivery to the
and we
compound.
said guns a couple of times, folks.
Well, yeah, we'll drink on that. One of the reasons: recent delivery to the compound of chemicals, instruments, and glassware. Written testimony from former compound resident alleging Howell had told him that drug trafficking was a desirable way to raise money. Several current residents who had prior drug involvement. Well, big shocker there. 2 former residents were incarcerated for drug trafficking crimes, and National Guard overflights. Thermal images showing a hot spot inside the compound, possibly indicating a methamphetamine laboratory.
So all this sounds like circumstantial bullshit to try to get
I'm a monkey.
anything you can.
I'm a monkey. I'm throwing shit at the wall.
Yeah.
And none of it's sticking, but it doesn't matter that it's all
This is
sliding.
what federal agencies are so good at doing, is just going, well, there's a hot spot in the house. I don't know what it is. It's probably a meth lab.
It's probably drugs.
Grow house, probably Martians. Either way, we need to just go in there and just kind of poke around for a while.
We just need to go in there and shoot some people. Yes.
So this is the desperate stink of
Allegedly.
Ruby Ridge showing through here. We're desperate to make a big bust and do it the right way and look like heroes again. It doesn't turn out that way if anybody's familiar with this, but they're trying their damnedest to make a big fucking stink over nothing, just so they can be the heroes. So the ATF plans their raid for March 1st, 1993 with the codename Showtime, as Chicken mentioned. They later claimed the raid was moved up a day to February 28th in response to the Waco Tribune Herald's The Sinful Messiah series of articles, which the ATF had tried to prevent from being published. Just gloss over some of this. We'll get down to the bottom here. And although the ATF preferred to arrest Koresh when he was outside Mount Carmel, planners received inaccurate information that Koresh rarely left it. No shit.
The reason they wanted to do it when they were going to do it, there was specific times of the day and days of the week they would do construction outside and maintenance on buildings and stuff, and that's when you would see Koresh and a lot of the leaders actually outside monitoring and there would be no guards or anybody with weapons, and it was the most vulnerable time. So they had planned this very meticulously, and the whole point was they had to have the element of surprise. They did not want anybody to know they were coming. They were actually they got old diesel trucks, loading them up with cattle trailers, and they were going to load them up with ATF agents. Yep. And they were going to pull up and just pretend that they were a local farmer coming to talk to them or try to sell them something. And that was the plan, to where nobody would know. But I know you're going to get back into the timeline here, but here's just like the craziest weird shit that happens is a nurse got word that, hey, there's going to be some activity at Mount, whatever it was called. And the nurse's husband or boyfriend was actually a Branch Davidian, and was able, or no, he was he was a reporter. That's right. Sorry. Anyway, so the reporter was banging this nurse. The nurse heard that all EMT staff needed to be ready to be dispatched out to the camp. And then, so the reporter's like, well, shit, we got a lead story here. We need to be there. So they took 2 separate vans out, and this is where the mail guy comes back in, because one of the mail guys, one of the cameramen, find their way to the camp. The other one gets lost. Asks the mail carrier, hey, I'm trying to get to this camp. There's supposed to be a raid, and I need to capture it on film. Turns out he is like brothers or something with like one of the head guys in this whole church organization. So he tips him off, lets him know, hey, ATF's coming, and whoo, the match was lit.
So yeah, this is February 28th, and the ATF attempts to execute their search warrant on Sunday morning, February 28th, 1993. Local sheriff and audio tapes broadcast after the incident said he was not apprised of the raid. Despite being informed that the Branch Davidians knew a raid was coming, the ATF commander ordered that it go ahead. Oh, what the fuck are you thinking?
That's where the pause has to come, because every documentary I've seen from the side of the ATF, when they were like, the one dude that like helped build the whole investigation, he wasn't the one that said to keep going.
Yeah,
but he was the one going, guys, no, we have to have the element of surprise. Yeah. We can't, like, if we don't have an element of surprise, we should not be doing this. Like, we have to call it off. And they're like, nope, fuck it, we're going. We got word from Washington, apparently, that this was going to happen, and they were going regardless, even though they'd been tipped off. They actually started writing, knowing full well that this could get very deadly and violent. They actually wrote their blood types on their arms for faster blood transfusions prior to them arriving. They knew what they were getting into at that point because they lost element of surprise.
That's just cryptic. Like,
they were there to pick a fight.
I didn't see that originally in some of the research I did. I'd forgotten about that specific little detail. It's just, you've lost the element of surprise, and now you're preparing for your own bloodbath, and you're still going ahead with it. Like, how many red flags do you need? They're just popping up tenfold, and we're still just gonna fuck it, YOLO. Well, no, just let's maybe
after what you've seen happen, after what happened at Ruby Ridge, you're still gonna do this.
Yeah. I can't believe anybody thought this was a good idea.
Well, honestly, guys, think about the way that high-level law enforcement would think. So hang on, just go with me here. So first, like, all right, we tried to go quiet. The element of surprise didn't quite work out. Well, we're the fucking ATF. If quiet ain't going to be the game, we're going to come in big and loud. And guys, I think this is where you guys come back in.
All right, so as Chicken alluded to, the cover's blown because of a random chance of events. The mail carrier gets tipped off from the news reporter that gets lost. Hey, we're going to film this raid, which, why the fuck are they even bringing that up to the mail carrier anyway? It just seems like weird small talk to divulge to a random passerby mail truck, but I digress.
Reporters aren't very smart.
I'll give you that. Yeah. So all the advantages of surprise are completely lost. This is KWTX TV reporter who tipped off the mail carrier. Mail carrier was coincidentally Koresh's brother-in-law, which, what the fuck does that even mean? He's married to everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Which girl? Which one? Which wife? Like,
that doesn't mean much. It's a very loose terminology there. Yeah.
Yes.
So Koresh tells the undercover ATF agent, Robert Rodriguez, they know the raid is coming. They're prepared for it. Rodriguez had been infiltrated for a while now, and he's blown away that the cover's been blown. So he makes an excuse. He leaves the compound, and
actually, there's his actual report. I watched a documentary yesterday. He said Koresh actually confronted him, and that he knew he was an informant. He didn't know he was an ATF agent, but he knew he was an informant.
And he lets him leave.
Well, he's like, oh, shit, they're going to kill me. Because they all had guns. They're all standing around him. Yeah. And Koresh said, love you, brother. Good luck. He told him to leave.
Which, you got to try to wrap your head around that situation. Why would he do that if he knows the raid is coming? Because this guy is involved in tipping off.
His followers were watching. That's why.
See, and that's just it.
Jesus wouldn't gun that guy down.
But David Koresh is a guy who makes his followers sit through almost 24-hour-long sermons. Like, this guy's got a unique form of punishment and implementing his teachings into his followers.
Are you saying church is a punishment?
I'm saying 19-hour-long sermons are absolutely a punishment. Locking followers in rooms that resemble jail cells and feeding you jail ration food is a very strict form of punishment. So yes, this is a guy who didn't really show a lot of mercy to a lot of his followers, especially with some of the other darker allegations. So the fact he let Rodriguez leave, it's just such a strange turn of events right at the peak of this boiling over. So I wish I could wrap my head around it, but it seems too perfect that he got allowance to leave after it's confronted. You're an informant. I know you are. And he's, God be with you. Bye-bye now. And it just blows my mind. That's just one of those linchpins to make this all perfect.
If you're trying to sell yourself as Jesus, you got to be, Jesus kissed Judas when he knew that he betrayed him, yada, yada, yada. And
it builds his story. It keeps his followers intrigued that he is who he says he is. Yes.
And I'm sure all the 75 to 80 people that died are really thankful for that.
82 in total.
Yeah, there you go. So Rodriguez says, what were they doing when you left? He said they were praying. They knew that this was coming, so they're praying. Women and children told to take cover in their rooms. Koresh told him he'd try to speak to the agents, and what happened next would be on the agents' intentions. So the ATF shows up with their convoys, the pickups, and the cattle trailers with the agents inside. God,
hold on. This thing got botched from the get-go because the original plan for this, they were going to have like 2 helicopters like fly in and like circle the compound to distract everybody while the agents snuck in and grabbed Koresh and some of the high-level leaders. Well, yeah, the helicopters showed up, but they showed up late by like 5 minutes. By the time the helicopter showed up, shit already hit the fan.
Yeah, they already knew that they're coming. They show up late, so at this point, distraction isn't really key anymore. At this point, it's more of a flex than anything else, and it's not really...
Intimidation, yeah.
Did they start shooting at the helicopters before Koresh came out the front door?
No. So when they arrive at the front door, that's when the truck showed up. Koresh opens up the front door, sees that it's agents, and they're saying, "Hey, everybody, put your guns down." Nobody's ever been able to confirm who shot first. Both sides say the other shot first. Either way, somebody opened fire.
Yeah, if you remember the Ruby Ridge episode we did just a couple of weeks ago, why is it always somebody innocently just shooting at a dog that starts the bloodshed? I'm starting to see a trend here, which is very, very saddening. But yes, obviously the Branch Davidians are like, hey, no, they shot at us first. We returned fire. The ATF is like, no, we were just climbing a ladder and accidentally a discharge of a pistol. That's why it sounds like it came from within the compound. That's why maybe they got confused, but it was an accidental discharge as we were climbing up onto the roof. So, of course, the ATF's not going to take any blame in this instance because they've got plenty of blame to take later on. Go ahead, Chicken.
So the gates are open. There's the confrontation. Shots get fired. They close the gates. And pretty much the Branch Davidians and the ATF get into a shootout, and not just a normal shootout. Like most people, you're like, oh, no, they're having a shootout. It's like bang, 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 pew, pew. No, this goes on for over 2 hours. 1.3 million shell casings were found at the scene after all this was done.
Wow. Well, but before we go any further with that, within a couple of minutes,
most of this was done in that 2 hours, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's crazy.
So within a minute of the raid's beginning, the Davidian Wayne Martin calls emergency services and he's pleading for a ceasefire at this point. And there are actual audio tapes of him saying, "Here they come again," and that's not us shooting, that's them shooting. So
Yeah. Right
that
away,
just
there was
helps
a 911
conflict.
call. Yeah, there was a 911 call right away from one of Koresh's head guys. Was like, "There's women and children in here. You need to back off. You need to call your guys off." And they
Where have we
didn't.
heard that before?
They did not back off. There was several 911 calls. The actual 911 operator, he's on several documentaries saying, I was trying to establish communication. Branch Davidians were reaching out, asking for a ceasefire, and I could not get a hold of the ATF. They would not respond to me. But the ATF, like when you talk to some of the people that survived the whole thing, like they're fucked. They're all fucked up over this whole thing because they know it was wrong. They know this shouldn't have happened. And they're like, we were in way over our heads. We had no idea how bad of a situation this was going to be, and we didn't know that it was going to turn out this way. But I'm like, well, you
kind of did.
You're suspecting this guy of being a gun dealer. You're suspecting him of having grenades. You're suspecting him of having automatic rifles.
All the allegations they threw down, and they thought this was going to be peaceful. Bullshit.
Right. Like, I'm like, what the fuck did you think you were getting into? And you lost the element of surprise? Like, I don't understand where, like, I get in hindsight, they can all be like, we didn't think it was going to be that bad. Like, I was only 20. Like, oh, okay. Like,
yeah,
that's not an excuse. Like, that's just poor judgment.
Yeah. So I'm going to gloss over this Wikipedia paragraph here. First ATF casualty was an agent who makes it to the west side of the building before he was wounded. Agents quickly take cover and are fired at the buildings while helicopters begin their diversion. Obviously, like I said, late. They sweep in low over the complex, about 350 feet. The Davidians fire on the helicopters and hit them, although none of the crew members were injured. In response, helicopter pilots choose to pull away from the compound and land. On the east side of the compound, agents brought out 2 ladders and set them against the side of the building so they can climb out of the roof to secure it to reach Koresh's room and the location where they were hoping the weapons would be stored. So on the west slope of the roof, 3 agents reach Koresh's window and are crouching beside it, and now they're being fired on. One of the agents gets killed, another one's wounded. Third agent clambered over the peak of the roof, joins the other agents attempting to enter the armory. Window was smashed, flashbang was thrown in, 3 agents entered the armory. When another tried to follow him, bullets start penetrating the wall, wounds him, but he's able to reach a ladder and slide down to safety. Another agent fires a shotgun at the Branch Davidians until he's hit in the head by return fire and he's killed. Inside the armory, agents kill the Branch Davidian, discover a cache of weapons, but subsequently came under heavy fire. 2 more wounded. As they escaped, a third agent laid down covering fire, killing another Davidian. As he makes his escape, he hits his head on a wooden support beam and fell off the roof, but he survives. Agent outside provides them with covering fire, but shot by a Branch Davidian, killed instantly. Dozens of agents took cover, many Davidians behind the vehicles, exchanged fire with more of the Davidians. Number ATF wounded increased. Agent killed by gunfire from the compound as agents were firing at the Davidians perched on top of the water tower. The exchange fire continued, but about 45 minutes into the raid, the gunfire began to slow down as agents began to run low on ammunition. The shooting continues for a total of 2 hours. Now that blows my mind. They had this plan in place. We understand they botched it. They fumbled a bunch of the details, and they're running out of ammunition before this compound of people whose supply chain is officially now cut the fuck off. Yeah, the ATF is starting to run out of ammunition, but the Branch Davidians, they're doing just fine in terms of ammo.
Yep. ATF did not agree. They didn't agree to a ceasefire until they were almost out of ammo and resources.
Weird. God, it's almost like, oh shit. Not only did we lose the element of surprise, but yeah, we ain't got no muscle no more. Okay, let's talk. You know what? We've thought about it. You're right. Let's just talk this out now. Give me a fucking break.
Now that people have died after an hours-long gunfight, let's just talk this out.
Yeah.
Now, granted, again, like even me, like a Second Amendment lover myself, is like, boy, if they've amassed enough ammo to actually outgun a federal agency, I can't imagine why the ATF was
Yeah.
wanting to poke
Makes-
around there a bit. Like, you
Yeah.
know, makes one wonder. But no.
Yeah, you think about that and you're like, okay, now I can kind of understand. Some of the people that lived through this were, teenagers or early adults that watched this unfold on the news, and you kind of start to understand why that age group is a little bit more keen on the idea of that old gun control thing. It makes a little bit more sense now when you think about it.
Well, now, granted, don't get me wrong. Second Amendment, folks get together and well-regulated militia and such, but
Here.
Yes, here. But these were some folks that, this got violent quick, and wow, like when you tell me that the ATF ran out of ammo, it's like, now, granted, you never really anticipate an hours-long, million-plus round firefight, because in wartime, this is actually, now I'm sure folks, let me know in the comments, but as far as I know, the most magazines discharged by a single isolated soldier in wartime was in the Vietnam War, where one soldier discharged 5 full 30-round magazines. And that's in wartime. So it sounds like these guys had to go through way more than even, like, I could only, because think about it, you only really normally rock about 5 loaded magazines, because that's as much as you could really need for anything. And
when Phil told me that story, that's why now I have 6 magazines for every rifle I have now.
yes, but it's just one isolated soldier, and he ended up getting back to his base alive. He just had to discharge 5 magazines worth of ammo to get there. So
I have 6.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting the name right. If somebody watching wants to correct me, I believe it was retired FBI agent, now Byron Sage. I think he was the one who was he fought in Vietnam. I believe that's who Byron Sage was. Now he went to Vietnam, and I believe he was one of the I'd say critically injured, one of the ATF agents who was injured during this gunfire. He said during a documentary, I stopped having Vietnam flashbacks because I started having Waco flashbacks. So yeah, you can kind of imagine what it would take to get over those Vietnam flashbacks and how.
Was that the dude that was like pinned down for hours in the little like bus underground?
No, that was I think he was one that was up on the roof. No,
I think that was the same guy.
There was 2 that were on separate ends of the compound.
There was the dude that was on the roof had to like jump off and then had to run and hide. I think
cover in the bus that was kind of buried in the ground.
Yeah.
See, regardless, you have to imagine the level of traumatic stress to eradicate Vietnam flashbacks.
Right. But
you're fighting civilians.
It's important what you just said there, though, is the ATF agents are having this fear of the Branch Davidians. Yeah. The Branch Davidians have the fear of the ATF. They have a godly fear. They think this is the rapture. They think this is the end of days. Mm-hmm. They think this is the devil coming to kill them. They actually believe that. And then the ATF agents are going, holy shit, these guys are going to die for anything. And they're willing to kill me.
It's a
for
job
anything.
For the ATF. This is the Branch Davidians.
It's a weird situation. They're all scared of each other.
Like Chicken said, Chicken said the ATF was scared of the Branch Davidians because of the firepower they're receiving. The Branch Davidians had only the fear of God in them. And that was it. And that's what I mean about persuasion is like, even in Sun Tzu's Art of War, he talks about you must be able to persuade your troops as to how useless it is to try to preserve their own life. And that is first and foremost in the art of war. And so David Koresh had perfectly mobilized his troops.
Yep.
Like,
willing to lay down their life for what
and
he told them to believe.
yes,
Yep.
and yeah. So, guys, so did everything. So did cooler heads prevail in this? Or what?
Oh, sure. Let's go with that. Eventually, a ceasefire is reached, and the Davidians allow the ATF dead and wounded to be evacuated, and that's when the one I believe that you were referencing was taking shelter, like under a submerged bus on the compound. 2 agents start making their way up to retrieve him. They know he's injured, like he's doing really, really bad. It's a good thing they got there when they did. But you've also got a couple of Branch Davidians armed with very heavy machinery who have not been informed that there's been a ceasefire. And now they're tasked with keep treading on. Hey, ceasefire's been called. We're just going in to get our injured agent. And they didn't stop, to their credit. They go in, they get him with these weapons, and they had the drop on him, on the agents. So they've got guns in their faces, and these two or three guys don't even know that the ceasefire has been called. But they get their guy in, they get him out. So kudos to those 2 agents for standing in the face of death and getting their fellow agent out. That takes some real fucking balls right there.
I was just about to say that's some Gizmo balls. Like it's like, hey, we're just here to get the wounded, man. Come on. This isn't like military on military where there's actually Geneva Conventions that cover this. This is a government agent talking to a civilian. So again, this is a moment where your pure persuasion skills are very much the difference between life and death, folks.
Yep. So the 5 Branch Davidians killed in the raid are Winston Blake, Peter Gent, Peter Hemsman, Perry Jones, and Jadian Wendell. 2 were killed at the hands of the Branch Davidians after having been wounded. Bodies are buried in the grounds. Nearly 6 hours after the 11:30 a.m. ceasefire, Michael Schrodner was shot dead by ATF agents who alleged he fired a pistol at agents as he attempted to re-enter the compound with Woodrow Kendrick and Norman Allison. Reports stating the Davidians did not ambush the ATF, and they apparently did not maximize the kill of the ATF agents, explaining that they were rather desperate religious fanatics expecting an apocalyptic ending in which they were destined to die defending their sacred ground. So
foreshadowing.
More word salad justifications there. The report notes this before we go on to the FBI siege. Violent tendencies of the dangerous
That's the
cults.
best part.
This part, the report?
No, the FBI part.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so 99 federal report notes the violent tendencies of dangerous cults can be classified into 2 general categories: defensive violence and offensive violence. Defensive violence is utilized by cults to defend a compound or enclave that was created specifically to eliminate most contact with the dominant culture. The 1993 clash in Waco, Texas, at the Branch Davidian complex is an illustration of such defensive violence. History was shown that groups seek to withdraw from the dominant culture seldom act on their beliefs that the end time has come unless provoked. So, fear of God. But it's just a weird way to word this as a justification. I understand the reason for legal jargon, but when you look at this as a whole and you see the federal government agency bumbling this as bad as they have up until this point, regardless of how crazy you think supposed religious cult members are, you have to look at this as a whole and go, wow, we're really going to let them word that like that and just fucking get away with it, aren't we? Yeah. Kudos to you.
Yeah, it's kind of odd to think that federal agents fired upon civilians, no matter the crime. There was the crimes were possession of alleged firearms and shit like that. There were other allegations aside, but were not proven or substantiated at the time. That came later. But I'm like, the federal government just fired upon civilians for 2 hours straight with no clear evidence or justification. It was pretty much Yeah. Like, okay, sure. They knew they had some guns that they shouldn't have owned. Does that justify shooting at them for 2 hours with women and children inside?
No. Just no. Just
And
no.
just when you're like, oh my God, my government sucks. The federal agents at the ATF suck. Here comes the FBI.
Oh, so the FBI's here, so it's all gonna be better now, right? Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't know if that was a brilliant laugh track or just so orange faced, but either way, that was spot on.
That's
Wow.
good.
That was stellar.
It's like, oh, okay, well, so the FBI,
So
the F
Phil
stands for
Phil,
fabulous, right?
I got some questions for you. If you were to take on a cult leader and have to talk him down to release the people under his control, how would you go about it? Would you be like aggressive with force, or would you what type of tactics would you use to free people?
First rule of hostage negotiation: you never say the word no to the hostage taker. That is the first thing. You find every creative way to say, I don't know if we can get there. We'll see what we can do about that. I'm doing my best that I can. We're doing the best we can at this moment. You do not ever say no to the hostage takers. Like, all right, this has gotten pretty intense. All right, Maggie's farm's down the road. Everything's fine. Why don't you just let the women and children go down to Maggie's farm? Or, take your pick. Everything will just be fine, and we're going to talk this out. All right? Once we get down to the courthouse, everything, we're just going to talk it out. We're going to figure this out, okay? I know. I'm just doing my job. I'm not the guy that even started all this shit. I'm the guy that's going to try and help you get out of it. And so, yeah, that's how I would actually approach it.
Beautiful, love it. I don't disagree. It's all about trust. You have to gain trust to be able to persuade. You can't persuade people without having trust. That's a key. Whether it's a real trust or not, that's to be debated later. But you have to establish some form of trust and some common ground to work with. So they send negotiators in.
Oh boy.
And the negotiators are getting some ground, and like David Koresh is like, hey, I want to like do this, and this, and I want to broadcast my end of days symphony that I'm going to write. Phil, I'll let you touch on that as we get on a little bit further. But while like he's explaining what he wants to do, and they're like, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, we can do that. What does the FBI do as soon as the negotiators leave? They put sirens and noise and weird sounds.
Yeah, they started blaring Panama through the loudspeakers, drive them insane.
No, they did worse than that. There were so many weird things that they had played on there.
Jump?
Did they? Probably.
I mean, that's worse than Panama.
They did Boots Are Made for Walking.
Oh, wow.
Which, if any of you know my brother's ex-wife singing
oh
it,
my
you understand
God.
how much I hate that song.
I would have been out after the first chorus. If that
if I may, the one thing that David Koresh was wanting was, and this was like a brilliant stall tactic I have to give. It's like, well, once I write my 7 seals, then I'll turn myself in. And so they like had these big like sheets that they put, first seal is done. 3rd seal is done. And I remember when I was a kid, I even saw like a blanket coming out. The 5th seal has been written. And then, all right, there's only 2 more seals. Well, it's getting a little cloudy, huh? I'm going to need at least another 3 to 7 months to get these last couple seals written. Is that so? Yeah, the seals at first they were willing to let it, but once they started to realize this is a stall tactic, it was not being used as much. But I still think, like, whenever, even talking about leading up to this, I was making some jokes about, like, well, we could record tonight, but we've got to write a few more seals, and so we'll probably get this podcast recorded in maybe like 2 to 9 weeks, and then we'll take it from there. All right, and so, but yeah, so when I saw that, I was, even as a kid, I was like, wow, that's a really good stall tactic. They bought that.
Yep, they did. They did for quite a while.
You don't have a choice, so you got to buy what's for sale regardless of whether or not you wanted to buy it. You're at the market. You're stuck at the market. You're not getting out unless you buy something, and this is what he's selling. Okay, I'll entertain this for as long as I fucking can, or as long as they let me.
I'm just imagining that sales pitch. I was like, and then I'll surrender myself when I have written my 7 seals. Holy shit, they're writing it down. Really? Like that. Like,
no. Like the holy
even
shit
he
moment.
Would have to start believing his own bullshit a little bit at that point.
He recorded a sermon, and they actually played it on national radio. That was like the first big given. They're like, you do this, and then you surrender. And he's like, yeah, sure. I'll record my sermon. You don't edit anything out, and you play it live. Like, there was dispute whether it'd be live or pre-recorded, whatever. But they finally fucking play it. And that's exactly what he did. What Phil just talked about. He was like, I gotta write the 7 seals because I'm the only one. I'm the voice of Jesus. I'm the only one that knows how to interpret the 7 seals, and that's the only thing that can save us from Armageddon. Yeah, this dude just went into a zone.
Knowing how this ends, and knowing to the lengths that they went to give him what he wanted, knowing what they allowed him to do, and knowing how this ends, it's like, why did you even go through the trouble? Like, I understand it's a
why
marathon.
Didn't you just tank him and tear gas him at the start?
Yeah, why? If this was your end game, why did you entertain it to begin with? So the Wikipedia entry of the FBI, this is long and very drawn out and very, very detailed. We don't need to get into all of this, I don't think, because we've touched on a lot of it already. But so the Davidians, at first they've got telephone contact with the local news media. Koresh, of course, gives the phone interviews. FBI cuts Davidians' communication to the outside world for the next 51 days. Communication with those inside was by telephone by a group of 25 FBI negotiators. Final Justice Department report found negotiators criticized the tactical commanders for undercutting negotiations. So that's, and I wanted to touch on this because I found it so interesting that what led to Koresh's rise to power was a struggle within. It's so adjacent to the struggle within the government agencies, struggling with each other to find a common ground to reach a resolution that benefits everybody. But when that can't be reached, just a struggle within the FBI and the ATF alone within their own units, and the falling apart of the plan as a whole. It always seems to be that struggle within, which is the own undoing of all these different organizations. And
struggle within, great Metallica song.
Right. So during the siege, FBI sends a video camera to the Davidians. Koresh is making videotapes now because why not? Koresh introduces his children and his wives to the FBI.
Imagine if YouTube was around back then.
I was just thinking,
God.
imagine just today, like, hey, TikTok.
Right? Like, you can't sit there and tell me you're not going to be hooked with your notification pushes on for the next podcast.
Oh, Messiahs in this next century are going to be so much more cool.
No, we're not. No, we're not. Because we're a dime a dozen.
We're a dime a dozen.
We're a dime a dozen. That's the problem. That's why there's not a new Messiah.
We're diamonds in the rough here at the Dog and Chicken Show. Like, yeah, that's a whole, yes.
So,
all right.
The Davidians sent out the videotape to show the FBI there are no hostages. Everyone's staying inside on their own free will. Premonition. Video also, of course, includes messages from Koresh. Negotiator log shows that there's tapes being reviewed concerning the tapes released.
So these people were not hostages. They were staying there on their own.
Yes.
Manipulated or not, regardless, they're being fired upon by the U.S. government, federal agents. The power got cut off, the plumbing got cut off. They have loud screeching sounds at all hours of the night. They're not being allowed to sleep. They're being effectively tortured. Men, women, children are effectively being tortured
by the government
because they might have some naughty weapons.
So I think this part's important. The videos are also showing 23 children still inside the compound, and the child care professionals on the outside prepared to take care of those children as well as the 19 previous released. As the siege continues, Koresh negotiates for more time, as we mentioned, allegedly so he could write his documents. His conversations which were dense with biblical imagery, alienates federal negotiators. They're basically just calling it Bible babble at this point. They're getting frustrated. They're getting impatient. As the siege wears on, two factions develop within the FBI, one believing negotiations to be the answer, the other force. This is where we're going to start to see that divide really split off. The thing about the 23 kids still inside the compound, Koresh was training these kids to be soldiers. Now, granted, this place was a compound for a while. These families had been there for a lot of their lives, some of them all their lives. These kids maybe have never been off the compound, and they're being trained to become soldiers. But the fact that the adults already there with the stockpile of weapons that they had were able to put up such a fight. Can you imagine if he'd had more time and actually got his child soldier army? What kind of a resistance this thing would have been? This could have been not just a complete and utter failure by the ATF and FBI. They could have gone further than this. Not just won the siege, but branched out.
I've heard that narrative before. I'm not 100% sure I buy into it. I get the idea of it. I get the concept
just a thought.
of it.
There might have been a route at the first encounter, but eventually there would have been greater force brought.
Oh, well, I agree 100%.
Well, and if Koresh really wanted to make that child army, he probably would have just put them out there on the front lines and put an end to the whole thing right away.
Right.
And if he was that crazy and
you got to wonder
though. Into the mind of madness. You're not.
You got to wonder though, if this was a year later, would that have been the tipping point? Okay, now you're ready. You got to wonder at what point.
I agree. Koresh was a crazy fucking. I agree. Koresh was a crazy motherfucker. Yeah. But I honestly think the dude believed his own bullshit. I don't think he wanted.
He had to.
I don't think he wanted the kids to die. I don't think he wanted his followers to die. As we see some other shit comes up here in the last couple days of the siege.
There's no story unless there's a big sacrifice, chicken.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So the FBI
we're not talking about drinking Kool-Aid though.
Right. So the FBI splits. We're doing the sleep deprivation.
Maybe.
We're blasting music. We're trying to drive him insane. We're trying to drive him out without too explicit a force at this point. So armored vehicles are being used to destroy the perimeter fencing, crush cars belonging to the Davidians so they can't escape. Armored vehicles reportedly drove over the grave of Branch Davidian Peter Gent, despite protests by the Branch Davidians and the negotiators.
It wasn't just that. They took those tanks. And they were taunting them with them. Oh yeah, drink. Yeah, we said it 4 times.
I say we've said a ton of the drinking words. So those of you watching,
I'll finish my beer here in a minute. But no, they took these artillery vehicles and drove them around the complex, taunting them.
Yeah,
they're playing loud music and noises and torturing them with sound, and then they drive around with armored vehicles. Knock over buildings, crushing vehicles. This was a total intimidation factor.
It's a flex.
it was a huge flex. But when you talk
Yeah.
to like the negotiators were like, fucking stop this. Like, you're feeding into them. They think you are the devil. They think you are the Babylonian like fucking horde
Yes.
coming to kill them.
Yes.
And you're showing them that you are. Stop feeding into their fucking religious cult. They're gonna just keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And as soon as the negotiators were gone, they take the tank and they start driving over vehicles, busting out buildings, and just fucking with them all the whole time.
Now,
like,
if I may, this is one thing to think about, because you said there was two camps. One wanted force, one wanted negotiation. Now think about if you're on the side that's favoring the force, and then you start to think, Jesus Christ, this dude's even starting to persuade the fucking negotiators. We gotta
Exactly.
fucking go in like that. I'm putting myself in
Desperation's higher.
like, yeah. And so again, I'm just trying to understand what that would be. But if those are the two factions, and this guy is as persuasive as we hear he is, like, yeah, that's probably what the Force faction was starting to get rather worried about. Is this guy going to somehow talk his way out of this?
I do have a quick parallel that, honest to goodness, I'm just putting this together as we're discussing this right now. And this is for my comic book nerds out there. Anybody who's read the Walking Dead comic books, and to a lesser extent the show, because it kind of glosses over this portion of the story. But when the first real settlement that the survivors come across is called Woodbury, they have a tank, and there's a guy called the Governor, and they storm the prison where the survivors are staying. And it was a complete flex move. They didn't actually have an operational tank in the comic book. It was just a show of power to the people who are stuck inside of a massive complex, kind of smaller numbers than the supposed government around it. So I'm just seeing the parallel and where the inspiration from that comic book narrative went. And man, it fits so well. I can't believe I didn't see it before, but anybody who's read those comics, you can see it here. And I'm just kind of a little bit baffled, honestly, at this point. Like, wow, I can't believe I never noticed that. Further down the line, this is coming to the end of the FBI portion. 2 of the 3 water storage tanks to the roof had been damaged during the initial raid. We're cutting power, we're cutting water, forcing everybody inside to just, kind of, hey, suck it, eat your rations if you've got them. Criticism later leveled by Schneider's attorney, Jack Zimmerman, at the tactic of using sleep and peace disrupting sound against the Davidians. Of course, because, it's very cruel and unusual punishment. They should have made them all subscribe to the KONE Nation. I
mean, it is cruel and unusual punishment to deprive people of the KOE Nation. I do understand, Tony.
That's what I meant. So you've got these increasingly aggressive tactics. We've got the divide already. Koresh is ordering a group of the followers to leave. So you've got 11 people leave, and they're arrested as material witnesses. One person's charged with a conspiracy to murder. But the children's willingness to stay with the Koresh disturbed the negotiators, who are unprepared to work around the Branch Davidians' religious zeal. So the thing about that is you've got to understand that these children have been persuaded to a point to replace the word love, the definition of the word love, with the definition of the word fear. What they understand fear being, they've been taught that's love. So it's not really that surprising if you look at it with that perspective, why they would be saying. So the children are aware of the earlier group of children who had left, with some women were immediately separated and the women were arrested. During the siege, several scholars studied apocalypticism, and religious groups attempted to persuade the FBI the siege tactics being used by the government agents would only reinforce the impression with the Branch Davidians that they were part of the biblical end of times, which of course it did. It increases the chances of violent and deadly outcome, which it did. Koresh's discussion with the negotiating team became increasingly difficult. This is more on the separation within the FBI. 1 week before the April 19th assault, the FBI planners considered using snipers to kill David Koresh and possibly other key Davidians. And that
would have worked out well.
Oh, yeah, because history tells us that works out just fucking stellar. I can't even believe that they entertained that idea after Ruby Ridge. But
if Ruby Ridge didn't happen, they would have done it.
Oh, hands down, 100%.
I was about to say,
I'm surprised they
there
didn't
is an actor from Ruby Ridge that does enter back into this scene, and a rumor I've always heard was that 2 rounds were fired from his particular weapon, and at this point, enter Lon Horiuchi.
So yeah, go ahead and talk on that before we get into the final assault.
Go ahead, Phil.
Oh, no, I was saying this is the point where he enters into the picture is Lon Horiuchi of Ruby Ridge infamy shows up again here at Waco, and there's some controversy, but from most accounts, 2 rounds were fired from his rifle. So this one person has fired rounds at Waco and Ruby Ridge, allegedly. And so, yeah, you get an idea that there was an element or a faction within the federal government at that point that was very pro just go in and get them. And
so
they came back.
He may or may not have been the guy.
Yeah. It's just, if you can look at it with
Get him,
knowledge,
guy.
Yeah, if you look at it with the knowledge of his involvement in both instances, you gotta wonder what else is a guy like that capable of, and what else was a guy like that involved with, because that's 2 pretty big deals when you look back at it now. So it makes you wonder. So we're getting to the final assault and the burning of Mount Carmel. Newly appointed U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno approves recommendations by the FBI hostage rescue team to mount an assault after being told the conditions were deteriorating.
Sorry.
And that the children.
You said Janet Reno. I had to find the scary button.
Thank you. And that the children were being abused inside the compound. So Reno makes the FBI's case to President Clinton, recalling to the April 19th, 1985, the Covenant of the Sword and the Arm of the Lord siege in Arkansas, which was ended without loss of life by a blockade without a deadline. We've kind of already missed the fucking quota on the no loss of life thing, but anywho, President Clinton suggests similar tactics against the French Davidians. Glad he's finally stepping in. Reno countered that the FBI hostage rescue team was tired of waiting, that the standoff was costing $1 million per week, and that the Davidians could hold out longer than the CSAL, and that the chances of child sexual abuse and mass suicide were imminent. Again, we've already speculated here. They didn't want to die. Koresh didn't want his followers to die, so
And
that
even
was
the
just
ATF,
bullshit.
the ATF informant said that as well. Koresh confirmed, like they had talked to Koresh on the phone and were like, dude, are you gonna have like everybody kill themselves? Of course, this is right after we had the Kool-Aid incident, back in the 70s. And Koresh is like, no, we don't want to die. I don't want anybody to kill themselves. That's not what this is about. Like, this isn't like, so a lot of people were like, no, that's not the belief, but that actually still made it into the report to scare the shit out of people.
Yeah, and it was a scare tactic to get a resolution done swiftly.
To make Washington move.
It's kind of like, trumped up charges on something that, I heard somebody said that Tony said that Phil said that Chicken said that there was something that happened down over there. Yeah. So let's go fucking kill these guys.
Yeah.
There was no internet back then, so if your agents on the ground sent you a report, that was as good as gospel back in DC.
And that's the other thing, the heavy involvement of the news during the initial gunfight and throughout this entire thing, like that was our internet back then. That was what we had to trust in terms of journalism, because we didn't have the internet to find other opinions or rumors or conspiracy theories out and form different opinions. We just had to take it at face value. So in retrospect, it's so interesting to look back on with more information much later after the fact and hearing firsthand accounts of what really went down, people being a lot more honest than they may have been had the internet been a thing right from the get-go. But yes, this was a scare tactic. We want a resolution to happen quickly because this is, frankly, it's gone on far too long. So the assault takes place April 19th, 1993. Davidians are heavily armed. Hostage rescue team has 50 caliber rifles, combat engineering vehicles, explosives to punch holes in the wall so they can pump in gas. They try to forge them out without harming them. Well, too little, too late.
So, like, the original plan is they had a massive amount of gas. They had enough gas to like gas this place out for like days. Like that was the plan. It was a slow drip of gas for days to like force them to leave. Eventually, you will have to leave.
Yep.
But yeah, sorry.
Or die of asphyxiation when you're trying to get to the door.
Yeah.
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 There's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That turns out to be a side effect. Who'd have thought? Apparently not the ATF or FBI or Janet Reno. Officially, no armed assault was to be made. Loudspeakers are used to tell. I guess this is just more bullshit.
I didn't have my scary button ready.
That's all right.
You want me to say it again?
No.
Right.
But if
Janet
you do,
Reno.
I'm ready.
Janet Reno. Janet
Will Ferrell.
Reno.
Will Ferrell does the best Janet Reno ever. Okay.
Janet Reno dance party.
All right.
So, according to the FBI, HRT agents be permitted to return any incoming fire, but no shots are fired by federal agents on April 19th.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Several Davidians opened fire. The FBI hostage rescue team response was only to increase the amount of gas being used. Sure. The FBI hostage rescue team delivers 40 millimeter CS grenade fire from an M79 grenade launcher. Very early in the morning, the FBI HRT fires 2 military M65-1 rounds at the Branch Davidian construction site. Around mid-morning, the FBI hostage rescue team began to run low on 40mm Ferret CS rounds and asked Texas Ranger Captain David Burns for tear gas rounds. The tear gas rounds procured the Company F in Waco turned out to be unusable pyrotechnic and were returned to the Company F office afterward. Oh boy, this is really detailed for a bunch of shit that you don't give a fuck about. After more than 6 hours, no Branch Davidians had left the building, sheltering instead in an underground concrete block room, the bunker, within the building, or using gas masks. So at this point, you've got to assume that they were just hoping that these tactics would subside and they would be able to endure it. Was he holding them down there hostage? Was he forcing them to stay down there? That's
So
debatable.
The eyewitness accounts from the Branch Davidians that are still alive today, I think there was like 7 or 9 survivors, and most of them agree. Koresh, they had an underground bunker, which was it was like a walk-in cooler. That's basically what it was.
Yeah.
And he had sent all the women and children down there in hopes that he could negotiate his way out of the situation. But as the tanks came up with the tear gas, they started punching holes into all the buildings.
Yeah.
And shooting the tear gas canisters in, which is causing panic inside and causing issues with them being able to communicate with each other. That's going to be an obvious issue that's going to happen. But they just continually keep ramming different parts of the building and ramming so hard in some instances, like the reports from the tank drivers were, we were trying to knock out holes in the wall so people could like run free and not have to worry about doors being locked. Okay, like I get that, but you don't have to punch a fucking hole in every wall and penetrate deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper on every ram that you're doing. Because
You're-
eventually they ruin the building structure. They shot so
you're
much.
just trying to compromise the structure at that point and say, hey,
I might be
fucked.
getting ahead a little bit, but they like I said 48 hours worth of 48 or 72 hours worth of tear gas. They dropped it all in just a few fucking hours.
Yeah.
They just because they're like, oh, they're shooting at us. Fuck it, more tear gas. And they dropped all the tear gas within just a couple hours and fucking just like decimated that place. And then we're just ramming the building over and over, supposedly making openings for escape was some of the that was the weakest excuse I heard. And that's before the fire started. Like, I don't know what your guys' thoughts were, but like I watched the video footage, like the raw
I agree.
original video footage, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like
You're-
these tanks are just like running up to the
bulldozer.
building and just knocking holes in the fucking thing.
You're looking to watch it crumble.
This is what people watched on live TV was a tank come up and just
Yeah.
knock holes into the building.
And people wonder why there was so much sympathy for the people inside, because this is clear.
At this point, whether you
Excess
like
force.
David Koresh or not,
Doesn't matter.
if you love the guy, hated the guy, didn't matter.
No.
This is where like the government overstepped their bounds to start with. They may have been justified to try to arrest David Koresh, but they
Sure.
fucked up that. And then the FBI like overused force and tortured people for 51 days. And then this was their solution. Hey, you know what? What we've done for 51 days hasn't worked. How about we fucking shove some holes in this building, tear gas the fuck out of everybody, and just knock some holes in everything as we drive around.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand the logic here. Like, I have no idea what the accomplishment, like whether you're an aggressor or somebody who's trying to like de-escalate the situation, like there is no logical outcome that is good here.
No, you're clearly trying to compromise the structural integrity of the building, and that was their biggest, probably their biggest flex. The Branch Davidians' biggest flex was having this big compound with a large number with rounds out the ass to protect themselves. If you take away the structural integrity of their protection, now you've got them by the balls. And that was the goal here. They can say whatever they want about, oh no, it just allows people to leave because they're clearly all hostages. We all know that's not the case. How many people escaped through those fucking holes? Oh shit. Nope, everybody stayed fucking secured and met their goddamn demise in the basement rather than try to run through those fucking holes. This was impatience. This was showing muscle, and this was just saying, okay, we've had enough, and we really don't have the patience or the integrity to see this through to a fitting end, so fuck it. Here we go. Put a hole in the goddamn wall. So this is where it gets a little bit more conflated, if it can get any more conflated at this point. So they start doing this. At around noon, 3 fires break out almost simultaneously in different parts of the building, and they spread very, very quickly. Footage of the blaze broadcast on live television. Government maintains the fires were deliberately started by the Branch Davidians, and some Branch Davidian survivors maintain the fires were accidentally or deliberately started by the assault. So this is where the official report of how this thing ends gets really conflated. Whether or not you think that they started this thing themselves, because now the compound has been completely compromised, tanks are running through the walls, our defense is completely shot, this is the end game, so fuck it, we're just going to start this whole thing on fire and go out in a blaze of glory, as our prophet David Koresh said we would do. Or the complete and utter negligence of the government agencies by doing, as you said, dumping 2 days worth of tear gas and ramming tanks into the building could have very well caused these fires as well. So in the end, does it really matter who's at fault? Because nobody's going to accept the blame. The real end result is pretty much everybody left died. In all, 76 people died, according to this entry, which seems a little low, honestly. A large concentration of bodies, weapons, and ammunition found in the bunker storage room. The fire engulfed the building. I'm trying to find where it says exactly how long this thing took, but this was broadcast on live TV. The reporters are watching this thing unfold, and they're like, it starts on fire. The whole thing's engulfed. It just keeps burning. And then eventually there's nothing. Now it's gone. This thing that we've been watching for months, this tense situation that we've been watching unfold, and now it's just wiped from existence, and everybody inside of it gone in the blink of an eye, just like that. Because of impatience, because of stubbornness, because everybody involved just didn't take the necessary steps to finding a resolution. And that to me is probably the saddest thing of this entire outcome.
Yeah. So overall outcome being the fire engulfs the whole place. Nobody really comes out of there. Like I said, I think 9 people actually come out. All the children died. All of them under the age of 12. I think it was over half of them were David Koresh's own children. They find David's body and his right-hand man, both of them with gunshot wounds to the head. All of this.
That one specifically, I think, was debatable on whether or not Koresh did, in fact, have.
I believe it was a gunshot wound to his like the front of his head. So they weren't sure if he killed himself or if he had somebody else shoot him. There's conspiracy theories that
who shot who.
Maybe government agents found him and shot him because the camera crews weren't allowed to be near the fire. But there is some footage out there where you can still see like federal agents kind of like running around the building a little bit while it's on fire. There's a lot of conspiracy theories around what happened after the fire started. We're not going to entertain any of those, of course. My biggest beef with this whole thing, I got 2 beefs. The federal government overreach. This did not need to happen. Didn't even need to come close to this. This was silly. Okay, if you're worried this guy's going to shoot up a bunch of people, okay, sure, I get it. You had him contained, and there was a standoff. I get there might be some concern for the people inside, but as you found out that they were being, safe, taken care of, and or were under his leadership, and they weren't going to leave. There's not much you can do at that point except for wait shit out or become more persuasive and learn some different tactics, because obviously brute force did not work here. The other criticism I have is if David Koresh
stopped them from committing mass suicide.
Well, that's debatable. So I'm not going to get into that.
Instead.
I'm not going to get into that conversation.
That's the problem.
I don't want to get into that one because there's a lot of different ways. Like brute force was not the way to go. That's all I'm saying with it. But David Koresh was like the biggest piece of shit out of this whole thing because he let people go several times.
Yeah.
And never once.
Informants. He let the informant go.
He let the informant go. He let other Branch Davidians go. He could have let the children go. He knew what was going to. He knew what could happen, and the only reason he kept the children was for protection. They will never do a mass assault raid on me as long as I have children in here.
Boy, did they call his bluff.
Yeah.
That's
allegedly
true.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
That's
unfortunate, and too many people had to lose their lives over this. And the fallout, and is like I kind of joked around earlier, is, well, folks didn't do that shit no more. Like that was pretty much the end of that, and
Yeah, property prices went up. You can't just buy like 10 acres out in the middle of nowhere anymore and build a church. Like people start asking questions.
Yeah, wonder why. History tends to repeat itself. Look at that. Only within a couple of years itself. Real quick on this, the last thing I hear on the entry. The remaining Branch Davidians, including the children, were either buried alive by rubble, suffocated, or shot. Many were killed by smoke or carbon monoxide inhalation and other causes as the fire engulfed the building. So the blame goes across the board. David Koresh used the children as a shield, his own children. He used it as a tactic of protection, yet this was not a factor in the final decision to prevent the potential cause of the fires itself. Like we wanted a quick resolution, yet this is the resolution we got. And understand, you can't put together a perfect hazard analysis of a tense and situation like this, but this was an absolute outcome that had to be taken into consideration. Everybody's dead. If you don't consider that before you sign off on something like this, then you've not only failed in signing off on what you've signed off on, you're just a shitty human being in general.
And as far as the government, if you have to send 6 tanks to a church, no matter what the religion, whatever the creed, whatever the issue is, 6 tanks to take down 100 people.
Yeah.
Kind of fucked up, bro.
That's like putting a 12-inch lift on your fucking Cummins.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, again, like, this is an unfortunate instance where too many people had to lose their lives over, sounds like, too many stubborn minds refusing to back down and not allowing cooler heads to prevail. And so the thing that can really be learned from this in your own life and be applied is, we saw throughout this particular story was the power of persuasion and the incredible ability it had to move people for good and for bad. So something for each one of you in the audience to consider is, am I being persuaded in my everyday by the people around me for good or for ill? And that's something that you need to be able to have the proper compass to figure out. Sounds like David had a very persuasive tongue, but it ended up putting him in not a good place. So this is a truly cautionary tale, an unfortunate tale, and one that all these decades later we're still talking about. We are still talking about Waco because, like you said, there was quite a battle. There was quite some fallout, and even now, when people drive by Waco, when I go to Texas and people are driving by, everybody just like, oh, Waco, like just its own name is just like Waco. So it's like Hatfields and McCoys. You really can't. It's just its own thing now.
I would say the only thing I disagree with what you said was they didn't allow cooler heads to prevail. I don't think cooler heads were going to prevail, but I think a better outcome could have definitely been reached without that many casualties on either side, regardless of the start or the finish. I don't think cooler heads were going to prevail. I don't see an outcome for David Koresh that ends where he walks out of this situation. I don't think he wanted all of his followers to die. I don't know that he necessarily wanted to be a martyr, but yeah, I don't think he was going to be a cooler head that was going to prevail, and the stubbornness of the FBI and the ATF and the desire to get a quick outcome after being frustrated, I don't think they were going to have a good outcome either. And you got to wonder, there had to have been another scenario that would have ended better, even if it was slightly better, that we could have taken than the one that happened. The other strange thing I was just going to throw out there. this is going to be a little wacky right here at the end, but imagine David Koresh actually legitimately being the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Can you imagine that setting, the early 90s, the reincarnation of Jesus Christ himself? He probably would have acted about the same way David Koresh did. Like, why don't you people understand? I'm serious. It's me. Why can't you understand? I'm the Messiah. What are all these guns?
I
What are
will
all
give
these
you
government agencies? Like, this is so
I'll give you that,
strange.
Tony. He had tremendous dedication to his gimmick. He never broke kayfabe with anybody, and so that's why. And at one point, he started believing his own press clippings. He went all Goldberg on us, and so yeah.
Even Ric Flair believes his own hype.
How about this one? This was actually one of the investigating officers' fear was that he had like an underground tunnel, and if they did not find his body after all of what happened, and then he appeared 3 days later.
Oh God.
He was like, I was scared to death.
Wow.
If 3 days later he came up and somebody found him, all the religious nut jobs in the world would have shown up in Waco, Texas.
What an awakening of religious persuasion that would have been.
What an add to the conspiracy of why you'd shoot him in the head, too.
Yeah, no, I get it. That would have been
allegedly.
Persuasion.
Allegedly.
Persuasion doesn't even begin to define a situation like that, because you would have had devout Catholics rethinking everything at that point.
Yep. And that, folks.
It's a good thing he didn't have that idea. Jesus.
Yeah.
I think that's most of the Waco story.
Most of it. The story that we're going to tell anyway.
Look into it. He had an amazing mullet drink.
He did.
We hadn't used that one yet. And by the way, I grabbed a beer that I didn't drink on Andre's night. Shiner Candy
Texas.
Pecan. This is actually really good.
Oh, Shiner's amazing. Shiner's a great brand.
Whiskey in my glass. So at least 2 out of 3 Texas toast there.
Ching ching.
Phooey.
But well, gentlemen, may I?
You shall do it.
Well, folks, we have gotten deep. We have done a deep dive omnibus into the subject that is Waco, Texas. And folks, we have arrived here at the end, the unfortunate end, but there is always a tomorrow here at Big Buckin' Empire in the KOE Nation. So as I'm known to say around here, all that being said, thank you for joining us this evening for our dive into the Waco controversy. You were here for the twists, the turns, the ups, the downs. There was laughs, there was tears, there was good, there was bad. We learned about the power of persuasion, and we all came together here at Big Buckin' Empire. I am the devilishly handsome outlaw himself, your king of extreme Phil KOE, the prince and potentate of the political parlance, the lord of the Scottish Highland, the conqueror of the ethereal, and one damn handsome man, if I must say so myself. Signing off and handing it off to these indomitable broadcast partners. Be sure to check me out at KOE Nation on YouTube and Twitch, and also head to the Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast this weekend, this Sunday. Double or nothing. Will Chicken reign supreme as the champion, or will Phil KOE hold that belt up high, or is it gonna go home and become the 10-time champion with the one and only Tony G? So, folks, Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast, YouTube and Spotify, KOE Nation, YouTube and Twitch, Big Buckin' Empire, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. These are all the places where you can keep up with your KOE content, your dog and chicken content, and all of the things and all the crazy cast of characters here in the Big Buckin' Empire. raise a glass to yourselves. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Tony, Chicken, take it away.
I don't have anything else to add to that. Yes, definitely check out the Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast this Sunday for AEW Double or Nothing, where I become I believe, a 10-time champion. That's just how it's going to be. I'm sorry, folks. That's not a prediction. That's a spoiler. So, yeah, definitely check us out for that. But, Chicken, what do we got up next on the docket for the Dog and Chicken Show? Take us home.
We'll see about that whole championship switcheroo here. I'm pretty sure that thing's going to be hanging there for another 6 months. It feels like it's been hanging here for 6 months. Like I had
too long.
I had like a little 2-week divorce from it, but it came right back home. But it's where it belongs. Yes. Tonight, like Phil said, we watched and hopefully we presented a good outline and presented some good facts on there and hopefully didn't get too opinionated with it, but this story is going to lead us into our next recorded. So next week, Thursday will be live. Episode 90 will be live on Thursday. Episode 91 will be a recorded one, just like this. However, it will be a follow-up specifically to this episode and what this episode leads to in the Oklahoma City bombing. We get the trifecta. And then from there on out, we would love to hear suggestions, thoughts. What do you want stories from? What do you want to hear us actually research and dig up dirt on and tell stories of? If you're too lazy to read through the Wikipedia, that's fine. We'll do it for you. Got it.
We're good at that reading stuff.
We're basically like a Reader's Digest of the internet. We take all that stuff and just condense it down for you.
Yep. But tonight I learned I kind of hate the government still. I don't think that's changed at all.
Because that was in question.
I still hate cult leaders. So yeah, nothing's really changed in my life. Like it was just confirmation. Yeah, okay. Yeah, confirmation.
Reaffirm.
So, folks, why have you not already liked, shared, and subscribed right here? Yeah. My God. But yes, gentlemen, this was quite a time.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
As always, let's say goodnight to the folks. As always, appreciate you. Love you. Bye.
Good night, folks.
And see if it just smooths itself out.
Back, tell you what I'll do if I ever get back. I promise to refabricate you, raging rivers of gold. That's what the brochure advertised. And now we're lost, we gotta take it down. Let you down slow, it's hard to survive. Nice. El Dorado. Oh, Lord. Well, let's see how that one went.
Yeah.